Hi there, everyone. Welcome back. Hopefully, you had opportunity to network over the lunchtime break and made some great connections with people who support or are part of our Nursing Now Challenge community. So, this afternoon's session is an opportunity for us to engage in a dialogue, to have a debate around the educational preparation for our workforce and the continuing professional development. I'm going to take you through the stages of our session and introduce you to our Challenges Committee members who will be facilitating your breakout rooms. But the first part of the to set the scene is really to outline to you that we are going to debate a topic that is really close to my heart. I was recently asked to write a commentary for the 50th anniversary of the journal Advanced Nursing. That was to, and I was given free rein as to what that topic should be. And the topic I felt compelled to write about was how our educational preparation is evolving. What we've heard from our speakers this morning when we were talking about the educational aspect of the State of the World's Nursing report and the recommendations was that we were really focused on how we demonstrate and develop the competence of nurses and midwives across the world. And to do this, a number of competency frameworks have been developed, and they have been really effective in articulating the ways in which we need to demonstrate our skills as nurses and midwives to provide regulators the ability to ensure we're safe and to provide the public confidence in our capability. And that has really advanced our professional standing in a number of countries. And we heard the positive impact of that in our session this morning. But I really want to encourage us to pause and think about the direction of travel we're going in, and as a community to consider whether competency frameworks are actually enough, and actually whether or not we are placing enough emphasis on the central role of reflective practice and how this could be foundational to the way that we educate nurses and midwives worldwide. The reason I argued this is really around this sense of us entering into an unprecedented time, and the premise of competency frameworks being very much about preparing us to respond with the skills and competence to what we know. And what we argue in the paper is really that we don't know what's ahead of us. What we do know is that it will be defined by volatility, uncertainty, and complexity. And that's because of the nature of the way in which the political world is operating right now, the implications of things that feel beyond our control, the rate of transformational change with technology, the implications of climate change across the world. All of these factors create a context which is very difficult to predict. So what we argue is that it is going to be the ability to respond to that unfamiliar, to that uncertainty that may well position us strongly as a profession to be at the forefront of that. Now, I don't expect that you have to agree with that position at all. Today's conversation is really about a debating the premise of that motion, what resonates with you, what connects with your lived experience, what's missing from the arguments, what doesn't resonate in the context that you're working within, and what would need to change if we were to take some of these ideas forwards. Now, how this will work, we'll start off in just a moment by asking you to take a vote. So we want to understand what people of our community think and feel currently. And we'll then move you into breakout rooms. And your breakout rooms will be facilitated by members of the Nursing Now Challenger Committee. You'll be allocated to a breakout room, which is either going to argue to agree or disagree with that motion. And it doesn't matter what you voted, you will just be allocated to a room. Now, your job is to make the absolute strongest possible case for that polar position. You can base this on your own experiences and what you know of nursing and midwifery in your context. You'll work together in your small groups for about half an hour. But when you come back, we'd like to hear from you on what is the absolute key and most compelling aspects of the arguments that you've put forward. So not a summary of everything you've spoken about, but really what are the 2 to 3 top things that you want the rest of the audience to hear. We just want one spokesperson from each group, and it could be your facilitator, but it doesn't have to be. And we'll hear from everybody when we all come back into the room. And once we've heard from everybody, we'll take another vote and see whether our position has changed. And at that point, we'll open the floor for people to talk about their reflections, to give their position, their perspective, having heard all of the arguments, and to work together to think about what our call to action would be. And when we bring all that together, we will place that into a written form at the end of today's session. And that written form will enable us to write a position statement from the Nursing Now Challenge community, which will be published as a response to the original commentary in the Journal of Advanced Nursing. So today's session, you will become debaters, you will become critical thinkers, and you'll also become authors, which is just a wonderful community opportunity to offer to you all. Now, it's going to take just a few moments for us to pop you into your breakout rooms. Before we do that, I'm just going to ask our facilitators, our Challenger Committee members, to pop onto the screen to give you a wave, and I can introduce you to them. Today we have joining us Anuka, Sana, Stephanie, Shazia, Kim, Darcy, and also Zippy. And just a special congratulations to Darcy. I understand it's your graduation today, Darcy. Huge congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So these are all our fabulous facilitators, all members of the Nursing Now Challenge community. They will guide you through your conversations and work with you to pull out those top 2 to 3 critical key arguments so that you can present to the rest of the group and try and convince them. So here is our poll. Let's take a vote now and see what people think. Competency frameworks alone are no longer enough. Reflective practice must become the foundation for nursing and midwifery education and professional development worldwide. Take your vote. So whilst we just do that technical piece of finding out what our poll says, we're going to play a short video just to explain what we mean by reflective practice, so we all know exactly what we're understanding by the concept, and then we'll come back together and you'll move into your breakout rooms.
As healthcare professionals, we have a responsibility to care for ourselves as well as our patients. But how can we ensure that we are doing this in the best way possible? We can do this through reflective practice, which is a way of thinking deeply and honestly about any aspect of our professional practice. It's about creating space to reflect on our work and the experiences we have had. It's a way to learn from our successes and mistakes to grow and become even better healthcare professionals. Reflective practice is not just about looking back on our actions. It's about engaging with the relational aspects of our interaction with each other. It enables us to unpack the emotions that surface by creating a space to share and learn about each other and truly share our human experiences. This includes acknowledging what we've done well and creating opportunities to learn from each other. Reflective practice can take place in a group setting like this one, but it can also be done individually. It's all about finding what works best for you. Reflective practice is an essential skill for all healthcare professionals, not just clinicians, to develop and integrate into their professional practice. It's a crucial aspect of ensuring safety and quality in the healthcare system. So, why is reflective practice so important? Engaging in regular reflective practices has numerous benefits for both individual healthcare practitioners and the broader health system. It improves self-awareness and the ability to manage emotions, including our reactions to situations and a greater understanding of our personal triggers. It fosters higher levels of well-being by contributing to reducing levels of stress, emotional exhaustion, and burnout. It strengthens the ability to adapt and respond to situations through the growth and exploration of insights. It supports higher levels of job satisfaction, enriches on the job learning and skill development, strengthens patient safety and care, and ultimately contributes to reduced staff turnover. These advantages can also help with staff recruitment and retention. We all have an opportunity to develop and integrate reflective practice into our daily routine, no matter our role. By embracing this process, we can create a space to learn, grow, and become the best versions of ourselves. Head to the Clinical Excellence Commission website for more information and resources on reflective practice and how to get started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that video. So we're now going to move into your breakout rooms, and we shall see you in 30 minutes, where we'll be hearing from you on your position, agree or disagree with that motion. Enjoy your conversations all. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed your conversations and you have identified your top points that you want to share with the rest of the group. So just before we hear from your groups, I wanted to let you know that we have found the results of the poll, and currently, before your discussions, 86% were agree, 10% were disagree, and 4% were unsure. So let's see how that changes once we've heard the different perspectives from everyone. So I'd like to invite our first group to present their points, and whoever the spokesperson for that group is, if you want to pop on screen and share your... Sana, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, Sana. So were you agree or disagree?
Our group was agreed.
You were agree. Okay, lovely. Looking forward to hearing your top key points.
We had a student nurse in our group who was going to have share the points, but I'm not sure if she still want to share the point, Deanne, or should I go? Because we wrote in chat, but our breakout room closed before she could get everything from the chat. So I'm gonna go for it.
Go for it, Sana.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we agreed because we wanted what we want the community to take from our group's argument was reflective practice should be embedded as part of nursing training at all levels and also as part of continuous professional development. It should be central of learning of every nursing framework and not as a separate entity to learn. We recognize that reflective practice is practiced very individually, but not in a systematic way currently. In a negative experiences, when there's an incident, we recognize that reflective practice coming together as a group as to debrief if it is part of the professional competency, like we must do the incident reporting. If coming together and debriefing would be a reflective practice part, it would help the team to diffuse the situation more quickly. It will prevent the negative emotions. It will build the teamwork, and it will build a more positive culture, and ultimately result in better patient experiences in a positive way. When things goes very well, reflective practice help us to see what we have done amazingly, to build on that momentum that will build the morale and bring the positive, the emotions of gratefulness and humbleness as practitioners. So that's why our group thinks that nursing cannot be without reflective practice. It is there, but it can be more centralized and in a framework which will help all individuals from all levels to have the skills of being reflective professionals.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sana, for that summary. And I'm sure that Diane feels that you've represented the views of the group there. Thank you on her behalf. Could I hear from the other Agree group next?
I can share from our breakout room.
Thank you, Anika.
Yeah, we had a really good representation of people from lots of different countries, lots of different healthcare systems, and also different ways of how these healthcare systems are resourced and nursing education is resourced. And we did recognize that there should be local adaptation and that there might be some implementation difficulties depending on how well resourced nursing education in that country is. But we did feel that the real strength of reflective practice is that it would serve as a foundation for everything that we already do. So in that sense, it is just by embedding it into what is already being done, it is being adapted to local context and local ways of communicating and working with other more senior colleagues. So it can be embedded to things like clinical audits or quality improvement projects and caseworks, etc. Secondly, we felt that reflective practice is actually a really great bridge between theory and practice, because sometimes the competence-based frameworks and the theories we learn in schools and university can feel a little bit removed from the reality and the complexity of nursing practice, whereas reflection can help to bridge that gap. And it did feel also a little bit more action-oriented, so looking towards the future and looking towards how we can learn and improve. And lastly, we felt that it was really beneficial that the point is about embedding it into nursing education specifically. So we know that there can be generational differences and cultural differences in how reflective practice is, the uptake and the acceptability of reflective practice. So embedding it into education is actually targeting the next generation of nurses and midwives who will be familiar with these concepts and who will be then mentoring and guiding the next generations as well.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anika. That's excellent. Really, really strong arguments there. Do we have another Agree group?
Yes. Oh, do we have multiple?
We may have a bit.
Oh no.
So this may be a problem because I think only team is against the argument.
You have to do a great job for us, Tim, on balancing out our arguments. Let's hear from the rest
you can
of
go
you.
ahead, Darcy.
No worries, thank you. Well, it was interesting you say that because we were a little bit in between. And it's interesting because having first initially read the article, I thought I would have been straight down, yes, we need reflective practice. And one of the core things that came out of our discussion was it's not either or. We really need both. And it's about moving. One of the key things that we were really quite passionate about is we can't go we can't skew too far one way. Both really serve a purpose in our profession because given the context of contemporary healthcare currently, we do need competency. But we really discussed moving away from competency to capability. And that's where we really feel like reflective practice comes in and it really underpins that. The other thing we were really, really strong about was reflective practice serving as this philosophy of learning. So as mentioned, for those who have read the article, as opposed to it being a task, an assessment, something we do after something bad happens or hopefully when something good happens, the hope is really for it to be just in, like Anouk said, embedded into the way we learn, educate, and work. And then interestingly enough, which was just probably my favorite part of our discussion that we really got into, reflective practice and it underpinning competency and underpinning how we learn really, 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 really emphasizes how we develop professional identity, particularly in the context of education and educating people like undergraduate nurses. We talked about, you look at that International Council of Nurses definition and you look at professional identity and the concept of professional identity really talks to thinking, acting and feeling like a nurse. And that doesn't come from competency. I don't know about all of you, but when I put a blood pressure cuff on someone, I don't feel and act like a nurse. It's all those, you know, I don't like the term soft skills because I don't think there's anything soft about them. I think it's our greatest asset, but it's really all about who we are and how values-based we are as professionals. So those were some of the things that came out of our conversations. We're definitely for it, but not for it in the sense that it's something we do. It more of a way of being, working, and interacting with one another as professionals. So that's where we got to. It was very interesting. The half an hour flew, which I loved. But yes.
I love that, Darcy. I think there's really something key there that you were articulating around the embodied nature of reflection rather than an add-on or a tick box. It is much more about the way that we work and live, really having that space to think and breathe. Thank you, Darcy. Andreas.
Okay, thank you. So in my group, I must acknowledge that I really had the help from Dr. Shani from India, and she really helped us to incorporate some of the most important points. So we are for the argument, and there were like three big things that we would like to share with you. The main thing, one of the main things, is that we live in a very complex world. And I'm talking about this healthcare world. Every year more, we see that patients, especially in those countries where there are some countries where patients have more years, like they get older and older, like 80 years old, 89 years old, etc. So they live longer and with more chronic diseases, with more chronic complications, etc. So that complicates and is a bigger burden to nurses, physicians, etc. for their care. So you cannot just adapt a competency framework, which is necessary, as Darcy was saying, but you cannot just adapt a competency framework to that specific care, because it's not just healthcare for those patients, it's also social care, economical care. So you need to navigate through these uncertainties, through these spaces, which are much more complex now than, 20, 30 years ago. And you really need to have this reflective practice capacity, or this reflective practice mentality, where you can navigate through these spaces, through with these actors, physicians, social care workers, other nurses, leaders, etc. So that's one of the main points, that reflective practice really helps you to navigate through these spaces and helps you to incorporate a specific care plan for every patient. Another point very important was that we need to incorporate very early in the curriculum. It's very important for early career nurses and midwives, but also for students to incorporate this meditation, this reflective practice, since they are 20 years old and since they are students, because as soon as they incorporate this process, they will understand better who we are as a profession. So what are nurses, who we are, and what do we offer to the profession. We are not just, otherwise we could just be doing techniques, we would just be doing, we would just be replicating procedures from the manual, but we wouldn't be able to really say, I am offering this because there's this need and this need and this need. No, I'm just doing this because it says in the manual that nurse do this. And that's important, but with a reflective practice, we cannot really incorporate our identity in our inner core somehow. And another thing is that in a process where, so reflective practice is also very important for critical thinking in innovation, and it's essential for problem solving, especially for those of you as me that we work at the hospital or in a healthcare center. We see that like every day. There are a lot of situations where you cannot just adapt the manual to the practice, but you need to improvise with your other colleagues, with the people you work with, and to adapt your work to the situation of that patient, and to navigate in a process where sometimes you are the most senior person in the place. And it's very, very important to really take that leadership mentality as reflective practice can only do. With reflective practice, you cannot take that initiative and that leadership mentality where you can say, okay, we'll do this because this, not just because the manual says it, and because maybe the manual doesn't adapt to the situation. So that's one of the main, those were the main things. I'm sure that I missed something, but Dr. Shani or the other colleagues will jump in if necessary later on.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you. So it's starting to feel like we're building a picture around the integral nature of reflective practice to our professional identity, and being able to give an account of the application of our competence in unfamiliar, complex scenarios and settings. You've already identified that this is not an instead of, it's a way of advancing our knowledge, and that we also need to be really mindful of the differences around cultural contexts and how resource might make a difference, but also how interpretation of reflective practice might make a difference to how it's applied. So that's our introduction to you, Tim. That's the scene that we've set so far. From your group's perspective, what's the reservations? What's the complexity that make us think differently about this?
Thank you, Gemma. I'm quite feeling like the Grinch that stole a reflective practice now, but I have to give a shout out for the group members, because we had a really good discussion, because it's a quite hard position to take, because we truly believe in reflective practice. And so shout out to, I wrote the name, Wendy, Dorcas, Natasha, Oba, and Faridat for the great points that we brought together. It's quite a lot, so we put it in 6 main points that we want to share with you. So the first one is a bit about emotions. So because reflective practice can create emotional vulnerability rather than resilience, because reflection requires nurses to rapidly revisit emotionally difficult clinical situations, ethical dilemmas, and personal things and perceived failures. And we are working, we talked about different working scenarios that we have, and in high pressure clinical environment already characterized by emotional exhaustion, moral distress, and understaffing and burnout, mandatory reflection may intensify emotional burden rather than reduce it. So what's the point? Does reflective practice stop being professional development and become emotional labor? So that's the first thing, this quite emotional and personal thing. Then we went to how we define ourselves as a profession. We had a quite interesting talk with David from the ICN, and we spoke also about the definition of nursing, but a reflection risk framing nursing as a profession of vulnerability rather than profession of strength, because nursing increasingly portrayed through narrative of emotional exposure and emotional proceeding and vulnerability, while humanity and empathy are the central to nursing, we questioned of the constant emphasis on reflection risks weakening the public image of the profession, and because we said that professional credibility is also built through competence, clinical expertise, clinical judgment. But if the system is centered around reflective documentation, may disadvantage nurses who less academically expressive. So yes. So that's about this image of nurses, not as a strong profession, but a profession that always reflect and always think, okay, what have we done wrong, instead of what are we good at. Then the third point was authentic reflection cannot be forced. We spoke about our experiences also in nursing school, and like that reflection is part of drills and part of things that we do. And sometimes people don't know how to reflect really authentically and it become a burden, then you just say something and you don't reflect authentically. So, and it becomes a form to complete, a portfolio requirement, or just you think you're being evaluated. And that creates the risk of administrative reflection rather than real reflection when it's institutionalized. Then the fourth thing, because we were a heterogeneous group and like it was like a different fact that reflection is privilege for verbal and academic expression. This means we said that like people maybe not be good in verbal expression or expressing their feelings, but they are good nurses, and you cannot judge their work by how they think and how they reflect. So, and that's a bit of a disadvantage for the people that don't do it quite good, or like they good at their work, but they cannot express themselves. Also, the fifth, and sorry that we have so many points, but like I will finish quickly. The reflective practice require resources that many systems do not have. It's nice to say, okay, we are doing now reflective practice, but to do a good reflective practice, we need trained facilitators, moderators, psychological support structures, protected times, supervision, and emotionally safe workplaces that a lot of systems cannot support this or cannot give it to. So that's why it could be problematic to say that we do it. And last thing, we were a bit sad to say it, but we are living in a world that everything needs to be quantified also as a profession. And when we say, we want to say our nursing, what are we nursing practice and how we putting to the governments that need to pay the nurses, how we quantify the reflective. But when competencies, we say, okay, that's good, we have competencies, and this is the cost of patients that are not coming back to the ER because of the good nursing work or the good nursing plan. But when we put reflective practice as the main thing of nursing, we cannot quantify that really, or it's really big work to quantify the reflection, and we cannot put it to the payers, the people that pay for our nursing practice, and say, okay, what are you doing? We are reflecting. Okay, what is the price of a good reflection? So that's our point. I'm sorry to be a party pooper. We are, but that's our point. And I was really surprised about how intense and how nice was this conversation in this really quite emotional subject. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. It really, I think what you've done there is really demonstrate to us live the value of critical reflection, looking at a topic that initially appears to be something we might agree with without much criticality, without much question. But actually, when we enter into that discussion and debate, we recognize there's huge complexity and grey areas within this that we would have to consider should we make a motion to advocate for critical reflection in the way that we have. I think you've raised some really, really key considerations that we absolutely cannot afford to ignore. Thank you so much for that, Tim, and thank you all for facilitating those conversations. I'm going to pause now and ask for the team to launch our second poll to see whether we have influenced anybody's position, whether they now agree or disagree, based upon the arguments that you guys have put across for us. So we'll take a moment there.
Now that I see the poll for the second time, I think there's now that Tim has spoken and has talked, I see that there might be some confusion when we refer to reflective practice as the foundation, the main core of the nursing practice, because that might imply that it's the only thing that we need to do and we forget like the rest of it. And it's not like that, as Darcy was saying, that all things are important, but it's, of course, as I was saying, and I agree, it's important reflective practice, but it might cause some confusion.
Yeah. And I guess, Andreas, this is deliberately asking us to take a polar position at this stage, but we'll work through that nuance in just a moment. So whilst we're just waiting for people to vote, I'd like to introduce you to a special guest that's been able to join us this afternoon, Rebecca Kenny, who is the head of the Centre for Compassionate Leadership at the Royal College of Nursing Foundation. Rebecca has been in the background listening to our conversations, and she's going to just offer us some reflections on what she's heard and to set the scene for us in terms of our call to action. So what might be our next steps? What we might want to influence and change as a result of the conversations we've had. So over to you for a moment, Rebecca.
Thank you, Gemma, and it's just so fantastic to be here. And as you just said, Gemma, absolutely just gave me that stop moment in terms of really reflecting on that really in-depth critical analysis and argument of a topic that absolutely can be seen from a number of ways. So thank you for allowing me to be part of that. And I think that a really helpful way for me to ground the start of maybe just a bit of synopsis from my point of view is that absolutely when I talk to compassionate leadership in my capacity as head of the Centre for Compassionate Leadership, I always just try to use a simple language around, I really see it as doing hard things in a human way. And I think that's what we're all trying to do every day. And this topic is absolutely pertinent in that. And so I suppose in terms of sharing my reflections, what I've really valued about listening to the debate and what you've put forward is that everyone's resisted making it sound simple and making this sound like it's kind of one way or the other. But I think we've also resisted being overly sentimental, but really challenging and thinking about the topic. So fantastic way to start that. I think on one side, I've absolutely heard strong arguments that reflective practice helps us to move from competence to capability. And I absolutely loved that phrase that was brought forward in the initial reflections, that it supports identity and that it bridges theory and practice and strengthens that kind of judgment in these really complex, emotionally demanding and really pressured systems that we're working in at the moment. And I could see for many of you, it's described as a real strength of nursing, absolutely, and particularly when it's embedded in how we learn, how we educate, and rather than just being treated as an add-on. And I absolutely heard that come through, and I hope others feel the same in terms of my reflections. But I also heard some really important and necessary counter arguments. And Tim, I did write down, because I think it's one to be remembered, that the Grinch moment, because that's what it's about, isn't it, in terms of our critical thinking, is sometimes we absolutely do have to put ourselves with our Grinch hat on, and reminding us that reflection is not inherently good in all circumstances, and that there is a possibility that it could open and cause harm, and how do we understand that, and how are we cognizant of that. And I heard the kind of clear concern that poorly held or reflective practice that's made mandatory could create emotional vulnerability rather than resilience, and that absolutely being heard. But that when reflection is compelled, assessed, or disconnected from action, that it can also intensify that emotional labour piece, and you'd use that language, and I really felt that coming through, particularly, as I've already mentioned, if environments are stretched in the circumstances that we're working in. But I also heard that people say if it becomes overemphasized, and so if it's not grounded in humanity, compassion, and empathy, that there's a concern that a constant focus, especially if it's just written or performative, and like you mentioned, you know, not everyone is as good as writing as they are verbalizing. I'd maybe have put myself in that category throughout my career. I used to watch colleagues who just write, and I'd spend hours thinking before anything would come out. So I absolutely relate to that, but I love to talk. I love to listen to music to help me reflect. I use different ways. And I heard that coming through in terms of the pressure that could put on if it's seen as something performative. And ultimately, kind of as I'm rounding up from a leadership perspective, I hear what I'm hearing is the debate seems to suggest that the real question is not whether reflection should replace competence frameworks, but how reflective practice is designed, supported, and used and who carries the responsibility for acting on what reflection reveals, and how do we turn that into action. And so I think probably what I'm hearing is a shared sort of position forming, and I feel like I'm taking a middle ground, and maybe that's the easy option, but I really did hear that shine through, in that it's not necessarily universal good nor a replacement for competence, but that when held well, it can strengthen our capability, sustain that professional identity that was brought up a number of times in the conversation, and that helping nurses remain both trusted by the public and human, as I've said at the start of this, for those who are practicing within those pressured environments. So I'd say, Gemma, that's kind of where I would have felt that the debate took us, and I hope that's a fair summary for everyone that spoke today.
Thank you, Becky. I think that's really helpful to sort of step back and summarise and take perspective on what we heard, and really to articulate that nuanced argument that's been articulated so well by the groups and those that facilitated those conversations. So our next question really is around what next, the call to action, what we would want to see change in order to navigate this nuance. So to really to bring forth the benefits of critical reflection in the right kinds of circumstances with the right types of approaches, so we can definitely harness that benefit whilst not falling into some of the downfalls and pitfalls that was described by Tim. So feel free to pop your ideas into the chat about how you think that could and should be navigated. And also, we will be writing up this conversation. And as I said at the beginning, you will all have opportunity to be acknowledged as part of that position paper. If you would like to be included, you can vote on this poll, and we'll make sure that you receive a copy of the paper in draft and confirm that you would like to be acknowledged and get sign up to that position that we take within the paper. So I'll give you, again, opportunity to respond to that survey now and to pop your thoughts into the chat. From our facilitators, any final reflections, anything that you would like to share in terms of that next steps call to action?
I would really...
Sorry, Andres, you go.
Okay, great. Just a quick comment that I thought while I was in the breakout room. So I work at the Hospital Clinic of Barcelona, and during the last 3 years, I've been moving around the whole hospital, especially the first 2 years and the last year. So the third year, I've been moving around, but focus on gastroenterology, hepatic, liver transplant units, everything related to gastroenterology and surgical care for those pathologies. And even though I am more focused now in pathology or in an area, I still move around. So I've realized that even though you have competency frameworks and you know how to do the techniques, the procedures, and you know, like the main skills that you need, that you should have as a nurse, every day that you move to different units or to new units, you kind of start again. So unless you have this reflective practice of understanding the core of a nurse, the core of what a nurse should do and how to act in different situations because of the experience or because of some advanced training that you may receive. Competency frameworks are not just enough because you are new, you are an early career. Every day that you move to different units or areas, even though you might have been working for 5 years in the hospital. So it's something that we should be conscious about and aware of while we work at the hospital, at the academia, that these changes, these movements don't help us like a lot to really do the best care for our patients.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andreas. There's the really key point there about competency constantly being learned every time you find yourself in a new and unfamiliar environment. But the knowledge and wisdom we grow through reflection is cumulative. It grows and it builds each time. And through that, we develop competence to be able to respond to the unfamiliar, and just a sense of confidence in our ability to do that. So I think that's a really, again, important nuance to the conversation. Anuka.
One thing that I wanted to add that I think was actually really quite prominent in our discussion, our breakout room, was actually some concerns about disagreeing to the with this motion that I think actually ties in very well with this conversation about what next, how do we actually move forward with this? And one of the biggest concerns was about local adaptation. So how do we make sure that reflective practice is really embedded into current practices and the realities of nursing care in each region and each country, and the communication styles? So there is a big concern about how reflective practice can work with hierarchies and within hierarchies, because some of it is also speaking truth to power. And that's how we grow and that's how we improve our practice. But that will look very, very different depending on which area you're working in, which country you're working in. So I think perhaps something for the future is having our local conversations and within countries and within our smaller communities, thinking, what does reflective practice look like for us and in the system that we work in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important and so key, because in some cases, engaging in these types of critical reflection is threatening to the system that we're operating in within, isn't it? And we need to be really honest about the constraints of that. And as Becky was saying, that no matter what system we're in, that there's a route to acting upon the learning that we are gathering from our reflection, so it doesn't feel like it becomes kind of rumination or stuck within those conversations as well. And it's making sure that the organisations we're working within have mechanisms to facilitate that. Well, I'm conscious that we're coming to the end of our hour and a half together. It has been incredibly, it's gone very quickly, incredibly insightful. And I think we've taken the depth of the discussion to another level that I didn't expect us to get to. I'm going to ask the team if they have the result of our second poll. And whilst they're pulling that information through, hopefully for us, just to say, we have a great announcement again as part of what we're able to offer moving forwards through Nursing Now Challenge, and that will be to offer our own version of reflective practice to our community. So through a partnership with the Foundation of Nursing Studies, we will be offering training to our more experienced community members to become facilitators of resilience-based clinical supervision. And as facilitators, they then will be able to offer reflective practice groups to members of the Nursing Now Challenge community, whether that be those that are students preparing for transition, those that are working within complex environments and would value the support of an external group to enable them to think and learn from their experiences, or just a general sense of being part of that broader community and the opportunity to learn from all of the different parts of the world we engage from on Nursing Now Challenge. So please do watch this space. We're hoping to be able to launch that within year, but it'll be another thing that being part of this community will offer you, either as facilitators or those that are able to join. Okay, so the results are in, and we've had some slight movement, not too much. So a strong sense of agreement with the motion. So 76% remain in support of repositioning reflective practice as a core foundational element to education and professional development. 12% disagree now, so a slight increase there in those that fully disagree with the concept, but a more significant increase in those that remain unsure. And I think from me that even those that are in that agree position, from what I've heard from the discussion, it's agree with the caveat of those other nuances that we've identified that need consideration and thought as well. And we will be sure to reflect that in the position statement that we put forward. Thank you all so much for your time, your energy, your insights, your perspectives. If there is more you would like to share, please pop it in the chat and we'll make sure it's incorporated into that position statement. And look out for next steps. If you've chosen to be part of the authoring of the paper, you will be hearing from us very soon. And thank you also to our facilitators. You did an absolutely wonderful job. I knew you would. And also to Becky, thank you for joining us and offering us your reflections.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Gemma.
So we're now coming towards the final part of today, and this is what we are calling serendipity networking. So this is an opportunity for you to enter into that networking space again, but to give a little bit more information about yourself so that you can be matched through the platform with other people who share interests with you, or maybe are from a different level of hierarchy within the system and might be able to offer some guidance, mentorship to those of you that are more junior into your role. So soon that space will be opening. We really encourage you to engage with that, and also to spend some time, again, having conversations with our partners that are in the exhibition space and available to speak with you. We'll come back at 3:30, so in an hour's time, and draw the whole day to a close with a summary of what we've covered today and where we go next. Thank you all.